So Kai and I remember the Bush years. Lexi, I'm not sure how old you are, but Mark's a Zoomer, and so listen here, young ones.
We're about to get mansplained to the Bush administration.
Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland, 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 Dixieland,
All right, y'all. Thank you for tuning in to Dixieland, the Proletariat. We're going to talk about Southern working class history and current events through leftist perspective. Make sure to like us on social media at Dixieland, the Proletariat, or find all of our links to our link tree at linktree/.prol, where if you want to give your wages to a bunch of rednecks, you'll find a link to our Patreon. We got a lot of cool stuff to give you, including CDs, stickers, a cookbook, Discord server, and exclusive episodes. We also have a Spotify playlist with some great artists you all should check out, as well as our merch store. This podcast is brought to you by Contractional Monogamy, not being able to afford therapy, living at home, beta blockers, Kai's pushing white men in the swamps, Nelson's love life, Tyler's hiatus, Mark's laughter, which brings joy to the masses, and Governor Ron DeSantis' re-election campaign. Shout out to our new Patreon subscribers: Jesse, Some Call Me Stalin, Sober Solidarity, John Doe, Hyper Ion, John Bean, Mackenzie, and James. Also, shout out to Psychotic Refuge for remixing our intro music that y'all have made fun of me for going on about 3 years now. I'll post a link to the music in the show notes. A monthly Patreon surplus goes to groups that are run by and are help marginalized people directly. As always, I'm Nelson with
Nelson.
What happened?
Is that Hyperion? Hyper Ion?
Listen. Okay, I was educated from kindergarten to post-grad in the state of Alabama. Okay, do you think I know how to pronounce words? Absolutely not. I don't even know how to read.
I have to be nice to them. They're on the same side of the ocean as me.
The only reason I know this is the Piggly Wiggly is because I know that face.
He just held up a jar of fucking Parmesan cheese.
That's what that says. Oh man, I thought it was
Parmesan. They really start bouncing around when they get positively charged. Watch out.
All right. Anyway, fuck y'all. And our guest this evening is.
Please introduce yourself.
Made me nervous for a second there. I'm Lexie.
I'm so sorry, Lexie. We have at the beginning, before we start recording, we always have a little talk with our guests where Nelson tells them how we do the introductions and how much of a clusterfuck it is. And he neatly left out this time, please introduce yourself. When we say that, our poor guests I can just imagine you sitting there going, I don't know what the fuck is happening.
What just happened? Did the podcast just die in front of my eyes? It dies every episode.
Gosh.
Welcome, Lexie. Hi, welcome. Yay.
Thank you so much. I'm used to chaos. Okay, I teach kindergarten. I'm, very familiar with chaotic settings. I'm Lexie. I am a elementary educator in the state of Florida. So that's fun.
Yay!
Yay, Florida.
The Sunshine State, which the sun is slowly going down in the state of Florida as it descends further into madness.
The sun will never go down in the state. The sun might crash into the state of Florida at this point.
A hurricane and the sun at the same time will just crash into Florida and it will disappear. And that's about it.
I've been trying to influence my two co-hosts to move to Florida recently. So I don't want to hear some bullshit, Nelson. Hey, I'm gonna get you there.
My soft brain is easily molded, so don't worry. You don't have to try too hard on me.
Any place is better than Alabama, so I'll move to Florida.
I've shown them like where Nelson can get jobs, like how Mark can get jobs. I told them like if either of y'all have interest in being airboat captains, I can get you in where my uncle works.
Oh yeah.
Mark has to be the airboat captain because Mark has the hair. Mark has the flowing, amazing hair.
No.
Envious of.
If you're an airboat captain, you need to keep that.
Yeah, that sounds like a hazard.
I forgot.
Like a Final Destination.
Sounds hazardous.
Dude, I forgot about that. Holy shit. Yeah, never mind. I'll be the airboat captain since I have no hair. I am bald.
Makes more sense.
Yeah. I put on my hat and my sunglasses and like cake my entire body in sunscreen so I don't char.
So at the beginning of the tour, you've got to like meet them wearing your big aviator sunglasses and your cap and everything. And then when you start, you say like, everybody be careful of the fan. And then you take off your cap and say, this is what happened when I got too close to the fan and ripped all my hair out.
Yeah, that's probably one of the cooler boomer jokes that I could probably tell. Like that was definitely a boomer joke, but it could be really good. I could get like, I need to have like botched hair plug surgery so it looks like something actually bad happened to the top of my head.
Just get it tattooed. You don't need to actually go through a surgery and get an infection. Like you don't have to actually like endanger your life.
I fly to Turkey and get it done. Oh my God. Have you seen those? Like, they're totally off subject, but they show up on TikTok. It's just like planes full of like men that have gotten the hair follicle procedure done in Turkey and Istanbul, and like flying back with just like massive just head trauma of them just getting it, because apparently that's the place to go for cheap hair plugs is Turkey of all places. I was like, talk about a plane that's full of insecure people. I was like, just own it, just be bald, just shave your head and grow a beard. It's not that hard.
Turkey's also where you go to get really bad dental work done, like cosmetic dental work.
It's
Yeah, where you the thing that you get done, like a lot of influencers and like people who have celebrity status but don't have celebrity money, they go to Turkey to get their dental work done, and they get the dental work where it basically shaves down your tooth into pegs, and then they slide like a cap on top of it to give you like basically false teeth with your actual like tiny little nub tooth as the middle of it. It's awful. Veneers.
Yeah, and it sounds horrible.
It has to be replaced like every 10 years or something like that. So once you start, this is the rest of your life.
Jesus.
It's a commitment.
All right. Yeah. So I'm glad we started off on that dark note because the episode's just going to get darker. Lexie, so what's going on in Florida? Because we used to think, granted,
just the entire state. Lexie, you are in charge now.
What the fuck is happening? Because we used to think, so Florida, like, okay, so obviously everyone forgets that Florida is a southern state, but Florida is a southern state.
Fucking who?
That's a bottom, Nelson.
People do forget, at least like that Miami's in the south. And when I think of Florida, all we think of is Disney World in Miami.
I mean, I've definitely heard that though. Like people don't associate Florida with like southernness. A lot of people do say that. That is true.
Nobody understands that if you live north of I-4, that is the South.
It is. It truly is.
It's like, what is it? Once you like go past Gainesville, it's basically, like you go north of Gainesville, it's just like, well, I'm in Alabama or Georgia or Mississippi.
Really, like between Orlando and Gainesville, you can be kind of questionable. And then north of Gainesville, it's just like it's between like Gainesville, and then you've got like a rest stop in like St. Augustine or Tallahassee. Like those are your only hopes, or Jacksonville maybe. And then like there's nothing until you hit like Washington DC.
No, we can't hear the dog. Mark sent us.
I texted it so I wouldn't disrupt the talk. Like, and then you just read it out loud. Okay.
Oh my God.
Defeat the purpose.
I know. But like, I guess I don't know. I'll leave it to the two Floridians. It just seems like Florida in the past few years has taken a hard right turn, because it doesn't seem like it always was. It seemed like it was a fairly like, granted, like Republicans did have statewide offices. We all remember Jeb with the exclamation mark was the governor and helped steal the election in 2000 for his brother. But it just seems like recently Florida has taken an extremely hard right turn to be on like the level of like Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and South Carolina and Louisiana. So like, I guess Lexie, the question is like, what is going on? But like, what have you seen like when it comes to, I guess, with DeSantis after he got elected, it seems like everything started going downhill with the CRT stuff and the Don't Say Gay bill. And how is that affecting teachers and students? And what have you seen?
Right. So just kind of before I go into that, I have to disagree with you a little bit.
No.
If you, just a little bit. If you actually kind of look at like the history of educational policy, when it became law, like federally mandated that we integrate schools, there was this phenomenon of like white flight out of public schools. And Florida was the biggest offender of that. The state that had the most white flight out of public schools into private schools was Florida. And they called those private schools like what did they call them? They called them like segregation academies or something like that. And they're still operational today. Like those private schools, they're not called segregation academies anymore, but they're still around. So it's definitely been a thing for a long time, but it's a lot more obvious now. And DeSantis has definitely like radicalized a lot of people more right leaning. So that is true.
Okay. Yeah. We had tons of segregation academies in Alabama, but like everyone looks at Wallace and his speeches and like desegregation and like expects Alabama to have those. I didn't know that about Florida. That's wild.
Yeah, if you look in, I don't know if you know this, but in Alabama's constitution, it still states that public schools have to remain segregated. Yeah. It's back on the ballot this year, I believe. If you about that. Funny enough, that first ballot initiative was when I was in undergrad, and we talked about it in class, and it failed. And it failed. Well, one, the quote unquote AEA, which is like not really a teachers union, but like the closest thing that we have, was against it because if they took it out, it would also take out the right to public education. And my professor made a really good point that you can tell in a lot of these solidly red counties that they did not care what the AEA said. They were voting on it because they were racist. Like, exactly.
Yeah. So it failed, and it's still technically in the Alabama Constitution. But yeah,
it's kind of disturbing.
it's really Alabama's Constitution, for those who don't know, is the longest constitution in the world. It's outdated, and it does not allow for home rule, and it's completely ridiculous. And we tried to fix it, but it never gets done. And that's a conversation for another day, because that could be a whole episode in the cluster.
Oh yeah,
that is Alabama's Constitution.
Yep.
Yeah. So go ahead with Florida.
Yeah. So the first thing that I'm a relatively new teacher. I'm pretty young. I've been in the classroom for a few years. But even since I've been in the classroom, I've seen a lot of things that have been changing. So I would say like the first big thing that really happened was we went from the Common Core standards to the BEST standards. The acronym stands for Benchmark for Excellent Student Thinking. DeSantis really likes acronyms that just sound cool. That don't really make too much sense, but there's really no legitimate difference, at least in the standards that I'll be teaching in my classroom, between the Common Core standards and the BEST standards. But that was kind of the beginning of like demonizing public education. You know, Common Core standards are so horrible, we need to change them. And then we're also moving towards a new, he's saying that he's going to eliminate standardized testing. We are getting a new test. But we already do a lot of diagnostic testing. So, you know, I don't really know what's going to go on with all of that. So that was kind of where there was a lot of like public, just like disapproval of public education, because he was kind of making it seem like we didn't know what we were doing. Our standards are so bad. Our assessments are so bad, and teachers are so bad. And then this summer is when all of these other crazy bills really went into effect July 1st. And so I don't really know the ramifications of them yet, because they just went into effect. But I can definitely go into what they say and what we can expect.
Yeah, you brought up a good point with the Common Core stuff, because I'm sure my co-hosts also remember like being in school and like always having to take those fucking standardized tests. It seems like every few months it was like, all right, we're going in for testing. It started with like No Child Left Behind, the Bush administration, and we always had the test. Kai is giving me a very evil smile. So
I was ground zero for this. Like, I'm slightly older than Nelson. And I grew up under Jeb Bush's FCAT push in Florida. Like my generation was the first generation to get the science FCAT and the writing FCAT starting in the 4th grade. You also had like a reading and the math FCAT earlier than that. So the FCAT is Florida's standardized testing. And yeah, like my classes were the first ones to do some of these, where basically they were testing them out on the students and you weren't going to have it be put on your record for that first year. So yeah, like I remember it. I remember all of it. And I remember like Jeb Bush being the bane of my fucking existence when I was growing up in Florida.
Yeah, 2001, the No Child Left Behind Act had passed, and it basically mandated high stakes testing, which was supposed to hold schools more accountable and for student achievement and create a system to penalize schools that didn't reach adequate performance and growth levels. But in my opinion, that's really where we saw this like blatant, obvious direction shift in public education, where it just seemed to me like it was just obvious they were trying to destroy it and like monetize everything and push for privatization at that point.
That is definitely a big thing. They really, really want to push for privatization, especially I don't know if they did it. They're trying to do it in Florida, but in Alabama, they really pushed hard for those vouchers. They're trying to get it so like you can get a voucher for going to a private school, and it's just absolutely ridiculous because they just hate public education with a passion, and it's absolutely ridiculous because it hurts everybody. Because
didn't you go to a private school?
I did. I went to a Catholic school because my dad is the reincarnation of is like Mel Gibson's twin. It's like an older, shorter, more Italian version of Mel Gibson. With like all the bad qualities of Mel Gibson without the acting qualities.
I remember asking you one time, like, did you guys go to private school because the public education was that bad where you were living? And you did give me like a half answer, like, yeah, like,
yeah, oh no, so
you
I
had to basically to get any kind of education.
We have like 3 tiers in Montgomery. So there's the private schools, and they're split between like the secular old segregation academies, like St. James and Montgomery Academy, and then you have the religious schools. So it's like Catholic being the oldest one. Then you have like Trinity Presbyterian. And then you have the magnet schools, which were so you have to basically get in a lottery and you go to the specific magnet school that you want to that studies different things. Like I went to a magnet school for elementary school that was math and science based, which is ironic. It was my 2 worst subjects. And then you have regular public schools, and the regular public schools have been gutted since desegregation because all the white people left them slowly but surely and went to the private schools or went to schools outside of Montgomery. So they go to, excuse me, Prattville, Wetumpka, or now the new one is Pike Road. Pike Road actually broke away and started its own school district, much like the suburbs of Birmingham did, to break away from the city. And funny enough, they got to raise their property taxes so they could fund their school better. But Montgomery, they shot that down every time Montgomery tried to, until it got to the point where Maxwell Air Force Base was like, we are going to leave, and the city economy is going to like crater if y'all don't fix these schools. So they finally, the state government allowed Montgomery to raise its property taxes to fund our still underfunded public schools. So yeah, basically I did starting in middle school, 7th grade to high school. I went to Catholic high or Catholic school because I'm a good Italian son.
All this is the product of public school, baby.
Me too.
Yeah, like my parents like bought the house that I grew up in basically because it was in a specific area of Orange County that we really could not afford to live in, but the school districts were so good. Like that district was so good. Anybody who's familiar with Central Florida, I was in the Dr. Phillips area, which is just so much fucking money that we could not afford to live there. But yeah, they got me into a pretty good school, but it was very much like in that area, what the schools are like based, like it was very much like this, the city kind of. So like if you went to Tangelo, you were at the poorest school in the area, which was just one street over from like where Dr. Phillips was, which is where I was. And that was definitely like along racial lines as well. Like most of the Black students lived towards the Tangelo side, and pretty much everyone else, there was a small pocket of like Pacific Islanders who lived in the area that I grew up in. And that was basically because Disney employed Pacific Islanders to work at their Hawaiian themed like the Hawaiian themed things, and SeaWorld also had Hawaiian themed like dinner shows and things like that. So that's how Pacific Islanders got to live in that area. And that's also why like my family got to live in that area, because at the tail end of like Western entertainment, where like Indian dancers were hired, like that's what my family was. So that's the only way that we got to be in that side of the county, because theme parks would hire you for being different.
Yeah, their influence over the area is crazy.
Yeah, definitely. I was the only Indian in school most of the time. That was it. It was me and like a handful of Pacific Islanders. And when I went to elementary school, I remember this very specifically. The elementary school that I went to was in a very like very rich white area, and every class had like one or maybe two Black kids in it. And it was always like, they always stratified it that way. Like you can't have more than two Black kids in your class every year. It really like bizarre kind of growing up that way.
America.
That's crazy. Yeah. America. Yeah. I'm the product of two public school employees, so we could not afford to go to any private schools.
I remember like when I started high school in the early 2000s, there was a whole bunch of my friends who were very rich white kids. Their families were like, no, we're gonna send you to like First Academy, which is the Christian prep school like downtown. Even though like the school district was really good in that area, it was still like, no, you're not gonna associate with those plebs anymore. You're gonna go to the fucking Christian prep school that was downtown. But yeah, like one thing, like besides my own memories of this, I remember that my mom, whose family was from New York and New Jersey, they were in a way migrant workers. They moved seasonally based on what parks were hiring at the time. So she would normally start a school year in New York or New Jersey, wherever they were living at the time, and end the school year in Florida. And so this would have been through the 60s and into the early 70s. And she said that when she got down to Florida, she was like months ahead of the kids in Florida based on the curriculum. So yeah, there is a difference in like northern and southern like teaching standards at that time.
Absolutely. There still is. Like when I get a kid who I can automatically tell if they're from out of state, because you know they're reading at way higher levels than the kids I've got in my classroom.
Yeah. Yeah, so where were we going with this?
No, it's like it goes to show like I've never understood like it's crazy that we have like so many different, like someone could be a citizen of the United States, but like because they grew up in a different state, in a different school district, in a specific part of a specific state, like just be completely either ahead or behind someone else in the other part of the country. It's great. It's still like a holdover. I know this is like really specific, but it's like a holdover still from like the Civil War, and that like we're at 50 independent states instead of like one nation. And it's crazy how like everyone else has like kind of done away with that and like past that, and we're still like, hey, we have 50 different ways of doing things that like doesn't line up, and it's bad. But I guess we're going into what are y'all fearing, I guess, for the fall with these laws that have been passed that I guess are going to start up in the fall with the new school year. So with the CRT pushback, and then the Don't Say Gay bill.
Yeah, so I guess I'll go kind of like bill by bill. So the first one is the infamous Don't Say Gay bill. It's actually titled Parental Rights in Education Bill. Conservatives are, really concerned about parental rights when it comes to killing public ed. But they're the same people that want to review the Indian Child Welfare Act. Parental rights don't apply to indigenous communities. We had problems with parental rights, quote unquote, at the beginning of last school year. DeSantis tried to withhold funds from districts that tried to implement mask mandates. Our right to go to work and not die of COVID was a little concern, but parental rights were, main priority. But with this Don't Say Gay bill, he actually signed this bill at a charter school that's in the same town that I attended school, K through 12. And that charter school was founded by his top education official's wife. So lots of interesting things going on there. But now that it's been signed, I'm prohibited from discussing gender or sexuality in the classroom at all. It's allowed in class. So I'm going to be a kindergarten teacher. Okay. So classrooms K through 3, we are not allowed. It's totally prohibited. For other grades, it is not allowed in a way that is not age appropriate. Which of course will be used to argue that it shouldn't be discussed at all under any circumstances at any grade level. People will tell you, I've heard a lot of discourse oh, it shouldn't be called Don't Say Gay. That's an unfair name for this bill. But essentially, that's exactly what it says. And the language that it's using is so broad and subjective that it could, apply to just about anything. And it will without a doubt discourage teachers from discussing these topics in fear of retaliation, reprimand, or being fired. And then there's a second part of this bill that actually requires school personnel to basically out children to their parents. If kids disclose that they're part of the LGBTQ plus community or something like that, we are required to inform their parents about this. It does state that information can be withheld from a parent if the school personnel feels that it might result in abuse. But how would we possibly know that, So it's just going to be a horrible detriment to queer students, to queer educators, as well as their peers and their colleagues. It's just not going to be good.
Who determines what's age appropriate? I know you mentioned that that's basically going to be a thing that just make everyone not talk about this.
That's exactly what it's going to be used for, because that is such a subjective thing. I would argue that you can discuss any topic with any kid at a developmentally appropriate, in a developmentally appropriate way, but they're just going to use that subjective broad language to, basically make people not want to talk about it at all, because it's not defined. There is really no way of determining if it's appropriate or not, or who it's appropriate to. So if it offends one person, then, we're going to get in trouble.
Also, you mentioned, faculty. So this is basically a recycled version of these laws that states tried to pass back in the 60s, 50s and 60s, trying to get LGBTQ teachers fired for their sexual orientation. So this seems like a revamp of that. Do faculty and teachers fear that they're going to get fired if they come out?
They absolutely do. I know a lot of queer teachers who are scared. Some of them already quit. People are a lot of elementary school teachers decorate their classrooms with rainbows because they're cute. And, they're not doing that because they're scared of getting fired or getting in trouble. It's really disgusting, the amount of fear that people are having to have just trying to be themselves or decorate their classroom the way they want. It's not good.
How else do you decorate a kindergarten classroom?
Right?
Beige and gray.
Just American flags everywhere.
It's just Barney holding an AR-15 and an American flag.
That's the dream.
It's just Disney characters in army fatigues.
No Disney.
Oh yeah, I forgot. No, we can't have Disney. Oh shit. So it's knockoff Disney. It's a fake Disney characters.
Yeah.
Lexie, does Florida have teachers unions? Are they as any of their
We're a right to work state. We can't do anything. We have quote unquote unions from our districts, but they're completely powerless. So no.
So you mentioned before, and I think we all know this from it was in the news big time, because it was DeSantis versus teachers when it came to COVID policies. So are there any individual school districts pushing back like they did with the COVID mask mandates and things like against DeSantis's COVID bullshit?
Not that I'm aware of. I definitely saw more articles about, districts that were being threatened to have funds withheld. And that might be the reason why, because they're scared of being defunded.
Have y'all seen, I remember you mentioned something to me on TikTok. You said that like, I think it was like in like kids have just left, like families have just like left certain school districts, and like our employees and everyone have just like you said, just left certain places and up and moved to different districts. Do you know like if that's a lot, or like what do you, I guess like personally, like what have you seen people that are just like, I'm just leaving?
The community that I had worked in was already extremely like migrant. I worked with a lot of kids that lived in hotels and lived in homeless shelters. So unfortunately, in communities like that, although this stuff is really scary, that's not their main priority. It's not their main focus. They're mostly on like a survival level. So in my personal experience, I haven't really seen a lot of the families that I serve in the community that I was serving, really super concerned about this stuff just because they had other things going on. But I do know that there are a lot of instances where that is happening, just not necessarily with, the kids that I'm working with.
I know this was basically like this, what I'm about to talk about was like during a school year and into the summer, I guess. It was more involved with high school kids. After the Parkland shooting, you saw a lot of students like doing walkouts and like protests about safety in schools. Have you seen anything from like older students that are more aware of like what's going on?
Definitely, yes.
Yeah. So what have you seen? What have you seen there?
I know that before the bill was actually signed, there were some kids. I know one kid, I think he was like the valedictorian of his high school, and he was queer, and he wanted to like discuss his experience in his valedictorian speech, and his school basically said that he couldn't do that because of all the stuff that was going on before this even became a law. Like they were already worried about it, and he did it anyway, and it caused a big uproar. And I know that there has been already some walkouts and stuff like that. But like I said, we haven't been in a school year yet where these acts are going to be in place. So I think that we'll see a lot more down the road, probably starting this school year. We might see some more protests from some high school students. Yeah, there's been some, but I think there's probably more to come.
It's just wild. Like it's just wild to think that like it's the reporting and like turning people in. Like it's this whole like trying to get people to turn on each other and trying to manipulate people and get them, they turn on each other. And I think that one of the things you mentioned was like you're gonna have kids that can't come out to their parents because their parents are like, just, we all are in the South, we all know how parents can be, like just straight bigots, and are going to do horrible things if like these kids come out. And then like you have these administrators and teachers probably on either side of the fence or either side of the issue that are either going to try to protect the kids or going to just out them. And it's just mind-boggling to me that and we know why, because DeSantis is an idiot, but like an evil, but like it just seems it's so foreign to think that like people that dedicate their lives to try to educate and like help kids are not going to be putting them in situations that they could face severe repercussions for just being who they are. And it's crazy that like this whole, I don't want to throw around Gestapo like lightly, but like these tactics of like trying to get people to turn on each other, to turn each other in. It's wild. It's crazy. And I know it's something that we like are shocked by, but like it's getting to the point where like it's just not shocking anymore.
Sadly.
I mean, not to me.
Yeah.
It's not shocking to me.
Yeah.
I had something like that happen to me my senior year of high school, where my school counselor called my family to ask if it's okay if they change my name in the yearbook without me knowing. And they meant like, they didn't mean any harm with that. And I was so upset and so anxious. So I cannot imagine how much trauma this is going to cause these kids who are just trying. They have nothing. They have no. It's too much for these children to have to deal with when they're just trying to go to school, on top of everything else that's putting them in danger. They can't even have someone call them something different to just take the edge off. Like that's what the only reason that I was like able to semi-navigate stuff like that is just once or twice a day someone calling me a different thing, and now kids don't even have that.
Yeah, it's really sad. And I know like there are a lot of teachers who are just gonna be so scared of losing their job that even if in their heart they want to do those things, they're not going to do that. That's not going to be me. I'm willing to lose my job over what I believe in. Like, I'm not gonna disrespect a child or a community member or a fellow teacher, you know, in fear of reprimand. I'm going to do what I think is right. But at the same time, I also understand like my material conditions are different than others. Like if a teacher is a single mother and she has to, you know, provide for her family, she, you know, might not be able to make that same decision. So it's a really sad and unnecessary problem that we should not be having in 2022 or ever.
And like, how does Florida even expect to, because obviously people are going to quit over this. So like, how do they even expect in the midst of a teacher shortage to like get people to come in and teach? You're going to have even this is going to exacerbate an already bad teacher shortage. So
I'll
now,
tell you exactly what it is.
How are they going to do it, Lexie?
Well, I can tell you one way, or actually two ways that they're trying to mitigate this problem. One is that they actually hired a bunch of teachers from South America, and like the county that I just left, they hired a bunch of South American teachers to come in and replace a bunch of teachers that had left. So that's one thing that they're doing. There's actually three things. One of them is literally crazy. A lot of Floridian districts are going to try to implement this. This is like not in the works yet, but they're discussing it. But they are going to try to provide like, they were trying to call it like subsidized housing for teachers, but to me it kind of is reminiscent of like company towns. Basically districts are going to like provide housing to the teachers, which sounds really not good at all, because then they're going to control not only their job, but where they live, which sounds pretty disturbing. And then another really not good thing that they're doing is they're just going to start hiring people that are inexperienced and unqualified. And one of the acts that just went into place, along with the other few acts that just went into place July 1st, is that military personnel, veterans, and their spouses are now going to be able to teach in the state of Florida without a teaching certificate and without a bachelor's degree. So, and the schools desperate enough to actually hire those people with no degrees are the schools that will be most detrimental to in the most high needs communities. But they'll do anything besides pay us more and treat us with respect, including hiring completely unqualified people to replace us and militarize public schools.
Did y'all have an Army recruiter come in like to your
yeah.
like lunch periods every single like fucking day?
Oh, sweet Mark.
Like they're just cutting it. They're just cutting the middleman out. They're just gonna start the propaganda machine, like, you know.
Yep.
So Kai and I remember the Bush years. Lexie, I'm not sure how old you are, but Mark's a Zoomer, and
me too.
So listen here, young ones.
We're about to get mansplained to the Bush administration.
Oh, I'm so excited.
No, it's just Mark hit the nail on the head with the Army recruiters, because every day, like, because I was in high school at the height of the Iraq War, so like they were begging for young kids to sign up. So yeah, every day at lunchtime, Army recruiters were there, and they had this stupid little table set up with this stupid bullshit and trying to be like, Army of one, be all you can be. And like every night on the news are like more dead in Iraq, more wounded, more etc. The war's going bad. We got to have the surge. Like I was a senior in I think I was a junior going into my senior year, like during the surge. So they were like begging people to sign up, and they would offer you just like everything under the sun to sign up. And they got a lot of my friends. And it's sad because they were dead. Like they didn't come home. So like and people that were older than me that went and never came home. We had an episode with my friend Travis, who's a Rock War vet. But like no, it's Mark, you made a good point, is that like if they have military personnel teaching, which in my opinion is worse than having like your baseball coach teach you civics, because at least the baseball coach probably has some sort of like teaching certificate or like some sort of qualification, whereas like the former drill sergeant who has PTSD like coming into the classroom is just going to traumatize these fucking kids. But then also it's prime propaganda for the US military to get these kids signed up for the meat grinder, to get them to sign up for the armed forces. So yeah, it's a total propaganda fucking recruitment thing by the military to get kids to sign up. It's horrible.
It is.
Be all you can be, kids. Be all you can be. They had the cool one where it was the Marine, the dude, like he got the sword and defeated the dragon, and it was like, you can defeat the dragon too in the Middle East against Saddam. Woo! Yeah.
Do 10 push-ups and we'll give you a lanyard.
So like I was saying that like I went to this really rich school district full of white kids, like mostly white kids. And because it was so rich, like even our Army recruiters were like over the top. My school also had a Air Force JROTC in the school, so we had kids in uniform every Wednesday. And
they're then, fucking insufferable.
Oh my god, literally I can't.
So our recruiters, and there were several branches that would come to the school and recruit, but I remember specifically for a little while I was part of a subset of students who were just pissed the fuck off. This was the era of like Rock Against Bush, like you remember that, like like mid 2000s like student activism.
Fucking Green Day.
I had friends who were just like, they were hardcore, and I'm still friends with them today, and they've really turned this the kind of cringy back then cringy student activism, like they've turned it on its head, and they're just the most amazing people I know now. But this was the kind of subset that I was in with, and I remember being so angry because our recruiters would come in, and my high school had an area where you could drive a vehicle into kind of one of the common areas because it was a Florida school, so almost everything is open except for the classrooms. So we had like these huge common areas that were under awnings, and you could drive onto it. You could bring vehicles into the common areas, and they drove a Humvee into that area, and then they opened up the back of it, and they had set up Xboxes in the back, and they were playing, I don't remember which games it was, and this would have been like around
Call of Duty.
Fucking Call of Duty.
This was around 2005, 2006. I'm not sure which versions it would have been at that point. This was heavy Halo era, and I'm pretty sure Halo did have money from defense, basically. So like they would drive in there, they have these Xboxes set up in the back, and they would basically just wait until game obsessed boys were walking by, and they had like 4 of them set up there. So not only did you have the JROTC like in the school publicly advertising every Wednesday, and the JROTC like events that were involved, and it was a big subsect of the school who were part of this. Like my school had lots of magnets, and so like I would say half of my school was like an art school, and then like a third of it was JROTC. It was the weirdest mix of people. And then you'd have like these recruiters come by with like and it wasn't even like, you know, like some shitty Humvee. It was like an amazing looking one, like all shiny, and like so what era would this have been?
It was actually armored.
Was it the first Xbox, or it might have been the second one at that point, whichever one it was. They'd be playing games out there, and I just remember being so mad because it was so blatant at this point. And the mid 2000s were a really weird time to be in school.
The fucking they did that. They didn't do that every time for us. They did it on field day, I remember, and they had the Hummer, and it was the Hummer that was definitely armored, that wasn't getting blown up in Iraq. But yeah, They had that, and basically, if you played Halo back in the day, you joined the Space Force, so you're now in the Space Force. So, but yeah, so they had it was every day at lunch. They had their table set up in the back cafeteria. I don't think the Marines ever came because they were like, oh, these Catholic school kids, they can't be Marines. But the Army was there, the Air Force, the Navy, especially the Air Force. We had Maxwell. The Air Force, I think, probably came the most. But every lunch, every day, they were there. So yeah, be all you can be, kids. Friends don't let friends join the U.S. military. So now we're gonna have Army recruiters full time. So we've regressed from the baseball coach teaching history to the Army recruiter teaching history. So I guess, Lexie, is there anything else about this Don't Say Gay before we move on to CRT, which is another thing that's been dividing school districts?
I think that's pretty much it.
So I think it's more than just Florida's having a problem with this mythical CRT that apparently came out, and I don't know where this started. I don't know where it came from. Critical race theory is something that's taught in upper level law schools, but for some reason, like, Trump supporters have like latched onto it as we're going to indoctrinate your children to become Marxists. So
I wish.
I think that'd be so cool. I think it's great. That's the point of this podcast. But like, right. So what's going on that end? What are you not allowed to teach about now? Are you not allowed to teach that Florida had slaves?
So this is another wonderful acronym, the Woke Act. Okay, so woke, it's literally called the Stop Woke Act. Okay, and woke apparently stands for wrongs to our kids and employees. So the first part of that act, I'm not kidding. I wish I was kidding. Okay, so like the first part of that act is basically saying like employers, including our school districts, right, are no longer able to include mandatory diversity training as part of their onboarding process because it's just too woke and it's just super racist to imply or insinuate that actual racism is real. So we can't do that anymore.
You hear that, Kai? I can
yeah, all that racism I faced when I was in school, definitely, like, that was when we still had diversity trainings.
Right.
I can't imagine. Oh my God, these poor people.
It's not good. So then the bill also like explicitly bans the teaching of critical race theory. You know, clearly they don't actually have an understanding, or they pretend not to have an understanding of what that is. We're not teaching critical race theory to 5-year-olds. You know, that is not developmentally appropriate and they would have no idea what we're talking about. But as professionals, as educators, we can utilize critical race theory to guide our pedagogical approach in the classroom and discuss issues involving race to students in an appropriate way. You know, we can do that, and I have done that, but, you know, supposedly that's also illegal too. Like, we're not supposed to use it at all. I don't know how they're going to, you know, enforce this, but it's the law. It also states that when discussing issues of inequality, we may not do so in a way that may lead an individual to feeling discomfort. Because apparently, like, white comfort is more important than historical accuracy. I don't know. Like, I don't see how this is going to work out.
And definitely, you know, just all the kids who are a result of racial trauma, basically all the Black kids, your Indigenous kids, Pacific Islanders, Asian kids, like all of these kids, their comfort is not part of this. Their comfort in learning that maybe their history has a point to it and it might be able to be addressed at some point. Like, I remember, like, being the only Indian in school put me in a really weird position because I was a curiosity piece. People were very curious of me, and I wasn't treated as a person most of the time. It wasn't usually on the brutal side of racism and more on the dehumanizing side of racism. But that always made me like uncomfortable being in, like, I remember in my junior year of American history, AP American history, I had a teacher who had us watch Dances with Wolves. Oh no, it was Last of the Mohicans. I think it was Last of the Mohicans and then Dances with Wolves. And then she handed out index cards, and as our morning assignment, it was to give ourselves Indian names. And I remember being so flabbergasted at that moment, and not really knowing how to react, and also being in a situation where I was the only person of color in the room, except maybe one other person who also was not Native American. I always refer to us as Indians at this point because I get mad, but like I didn't have another Native American person in the classroom. So like, instead of getting angry about it, I just raised my hand and said, what if you legitimately already have one? And the teacher just didn't stop her a second. It was just, we'll just write that down, instead of like taking a moment
to think
about like, hey, maybe this isn't the best exercise I've ever had my AP American history students do.
Perhaps not.
No, time out. That was AP US history?
Yes, it was.
That's not good. That's not good.
Holy shit.
Yeah, that was my first class in the morning, and I don't know if school times have changed. I know that they changed right after I got out of school, and I think they went back. So first period in high school at that point in Florida started at 7:15 in the morning.
Good Lord.
A 16 or 17-year-old Kai at 7:15 in the morning having to watch this bullshit and then write an Indian name on an index card and turn it in as an assignment. Like,
no. And that's why we need diversity training. That's a prime example.
I don't know how you can approach things like slavery, or the way that Asian people were treated, like with the building of the railroads, or with internment camps around. Like, I don't know how you can approach these at all without any discomfort for the white students in class.
Get over it. Like,
you might as well say, okay, these things happened and nobody did them. Like, they shot into existence and then disappeared again. Nobody put forward those plans. Nobody executed those plans. Nobody was part of enforcing it. Like, none of this happened. They just happened and they disappeared. It's
like the kid raises their hand. It's like, teacher, you say that the Seminoles were native to Florida, but like, why are there a lot in Oklahoma? And the teacher's just like, shut up.
Yeah.
They moved voluntarily.
Yeah. Yeah. Not good.
Oh man. It's like in Texas where they tried to say that they wanted to change slavery to what was it? This sounds like this sounds crazy, but it was something like imported workers.
Yeah, I heard that.
Or something like that. It's just
something like that.
What the fuck?
Yeah, you don't think that makes people feel like uncomfortable?
Oh my God.
I don't know how you're gonna, like, I know as like a teacher of really young kids, like the opportunities for these are going to probably be less than for teachers of older kids, but like, how do you foresee this impacting you and like your normal teaching methods?
It's not going to impact me at all. I'm going to continue doing what I do. I don't care what they say. I do discuss all of this stuff with my littles and they understand it, and little kids are really empathetic and they're really good listeners and learners, and they understand like new topics better than old people half the time. You know, it is going to affect a lot of teachers. What's going to happen is they're going to be scared to talk about it at all, and unless it's directly, what people are going to end up doing is, we're given a curriculum, right? In the beginning of the year, we're given the textbooks to use, and they're going to read out of that, and that's it, because they're going to feel like, you know, this was the resource I was given. This is what I'm allowed to discuss, and then they're not going to go outside of that. I never do that. I always, you know, kids are smart. They're inquisitive. They're capable of having these conversations, and I'm going to continue doing that. But what's going to happen is people are just going to read out of the textbook, and then that's that.
Have they made like a list of like books that you aren't gonna like have access to anymore?
Yeah, so there definitely is a big long banned book list. And I know that a lot of districts are also not allowing like teachers to have their own classroom libraries anymore either, just in case there's another book that they don't like, and it might make somebody angry. It's kind of ridiculous. I don't care. I'm gonna have books in my class for my kids to read. I don't understand why we can't be trusted to have our own classroom libraries. But yeah, there's definitely a big long banned book list.
So they Oh, Mark, I'm sorry. You're gonna say something?
Well, I was thinking about like as a child, that being the only thing I looked forward to. Like, like you do your work that was like whatever you needed, and my grandmother was kind enough to go ahead and like try to teach me how to read beforehand. I didn't go to pre-K. She like taught me like whatever because she had a lot of free time with me at that stage. But I remember that like motivating me to work. Like, oh, if I hurry up and do this,
I can go read a book.
Yeah, then I can go away from this and go read a book. And so, like, what now? Like, what about these kids that are motivated by stuff like that? Like, they don't care about children at all.
No, they don't. And it's so obvious. Like, kids are just political pawns. They're means to an end. You know, all of this legislation does not have the child's well-being in mind at all. They really want to obliterate public education. If you look at the people who are putting these bills into law, all their kids go to wealthy private schools with all the books in the world. And, you know, during all that, when COVID was at its height, all of them were wearing masks and, you know, they were getting a proper education. So it's not that they legitimately think this is best practice, it's that they don't care about poor kids.
God. So they actually passed something like I love this, the woke act that just that cracks me the fuck up. They passed something like that. They passed that basically the same thing in Alabama. And one of the this has to do with more higher education. One of the people that spoke out against it was this, granted, like quote unquote free speech organizations are murky and weird, in my opinion, to say the least, because they can be good, but they can also be like, shut the fuck up. But they made the point that like there's a lot of kids that are in AP classes that are seniors who take classes sometimes at college level courses at like local community colleges or city campuses for state universities. And he brought up the point where like this bill is so vague that like if you have a high school senior that's at a community college taking history or at a state college taking a state school taking history, and they learn about things that they don't learn in high school, is the professor going to be in trouble then? Like how the people who write these laws are so fucking stupid because they don't understand like all the consequences of their actions of these bills. Like they just think that like, oh, it's just a blanket, like we'll do away with this law that we haven't read, we'll do it. But like that was a good point. It was like if you have a high school student that is taking night classes, college level classes at a community college or city campus or even at a university, what happens then if they quote unquote learn something? Because the bill, I don't know in Florida, but in Alabama, it's only K through 12. So colleges and universities can teach whatever they want. But what happens when that high school senior learns about something that is banned in high school? Like, is the professor at fault? Does the university get in trouble? Like, how does that work? And then how does that play into tenure? Like, what if this professor's tenured? Like, how does that work? It's just there's so many problems that happen when these right-wing, when these fascists basically pass these bills to try to limit the scope of education and learning, because it's ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. Like they want to completely erase history. And like, I don't want to get too far. I did hear this the other day and I thought it was a very good analogy. And I don't want to piss people off on the left real quick, but people, it's going to happen. It always happens. But people are in awe and wonder of like how people in China don't know about the Tiananmen Square massacre, right? Whether if it happened or not, it's not up for debate. They're just saying like, how do people are like, how do people in China not know what happened in Tiananmen Square in 1989? And then you ask them about like, well, do you know about the Ludlow massacre? Do you know about Blair Mountain? Do you know that the move bombing? Do you know that, like, do you know about like what happened during slavery? Do you know why the Civil War was fought? Do you know these things? They're like, no, like people don't know about these things. And they wonder like it's just mind boggling. It's just mind boggling. They can be like, how did people in China not know about Tiananmen Square? But then you ask Americans like, do you know like this big thing that happened in US history? And they're like, no, we were never taught that. It's the whole thing that came out with the Tulsa race massacre. Everyone was like, I never heard about that in school. I mean, I think there was like there's like one little picture and like a blip in a sentence about it, like during the civil rights stuff, the early like 1900s, right? But for the most part, I would say 90% of the people in the U.S. did not know that there was a pogrom basically in Tulsa, Oklahoma, of Black people, and until recently. And it's stuff like that they want to suppress. They want to suppress entire chunks of U.S. history that are riddled with white supremacy and violence. And it's to create this narrative that America is this peaceful place and nothing bad ever happened. The United States is perfect, and God bless America.
Yep. It's the ridiculous American exceptionalism whole like ideology. America's great, nothing bad happened here. We focus on the atrocities everywhere else. Nothing bad happened here ever. We don't want to teach history. We want to teach American mythology, and that's that.
Exactly. If you don't like it, you can get out.
Exactly. and to answer your question, I do believe that not only does this apply to K-12, I think that it also applies in a way to university too. And they're saying that they're going to try to like withhold funding from universities if they feel like they're violating the expectations of the legislation too. So like if a kid is learning about whatever in the university and he feels uncomfortable, they might sue them and or take funds or whatever too.
So if a law school actually teaches critical race theory, they're going to get in trouble. Like the one place you actually learn about CRT. That's ridiculous.
Probably.
That's so ridiculous. Because that brings up, like I said, other battles with like tenure and a bunch of other things. Like you're going to have, wow. It's just, you're going to have a massive
no logistics, but that's not even the worst part of this bill. The Stop
God.
Woke Act is bad. And then it just gets worse, in my opinion, as like a primary elementary school teacher. This is really the worst part to me. Now, I kid you not, like you can read it. You can literally look it up and read it yourself. They struck out any mention of mental and emotional health and character development. So there's like one section of it that covers like health education, anything regarding mental health, emotional health, character development. So like SEL, which is social emotional learning, all struck out. So, you know, they're actively and outwardly against these things. That is mind boggling to me. Why?
Can you imagine the ex-drill sergeant having to placate the people's emotions? It's just like,
God,
what is happening? How are like counselors, like if there's even any left in public schools,
Barely.
how are they supposed to deal with kids that have issues? Like what's going to happen to, I don't even know. Like the possibilities are endless when it comes to stuff like this. I don't understand how people are supposed to function.
I don't know. I have no answers.
That seems weird to me because it feels like I was trying to think of what that might qualify as. And I was thinking of stuff like treat others how you want to be treated, blah, blah, blah. And it seems like a lot of those things where it's like values and morals also are things that I was being like, I'll say taught with air quotes around it. In like in Sunday school. So when does it go from this is okay and good and Christian for these children to learn emotional and like, I don't know. Like it just seems like a very weird umbrella that I can't even think of a situation for.
It is. And it goes back to that whole parental rights thing. I think like they're like, these are the things that should be taught at church and at home. This isn't the responsibility of the teacher. But if it's not happening at home and I've got kids wilding out in my classroom, I have no choice but to talk about these things, but they're very much against it. So I don't know what they expect us to do at that point.
I mean, what they expect, like this stuff, like, and even goes back to you mentioned the Don't Say Gay bill. It's just like there's stuff that kids confide in teachers and counselors that they don't tell their parents. Like
exactly.
Like even with when I was a camp counselor, like my kids that were like middle school, high school age kids, like confided stuff in me that they wouldn't have told their parents because their parents didn't understand. and you have to be like comforting and help them. Like you have to be like, hey, that's okay, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And like even I tutor, and it's even I have kids that tutor. I'll be like, what do you think about blah blah, like what do you think about blah 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 blah? And I'm like, well, that's very interesting. So and so, let's talk about that for a sec, just to like talk, just to get their minds off like what they're learning. And it's just
the
like,
content. Yeah.
the content, like they confide in you things that like they wouldn't their parents. So like obviously you're gonna have situations where you're gonna have to teach, because parents and some like who
didn't
didn't do that. So it's oh god.
Yep.
I think at the tutoring center, our like textbooks and stuff that we use are so old that like and they talk about such random things that I'm gonna have an opportunity to teach these kids critical race theory in this tutoring center. So I'm gonna do my part.
Please do.
But yeah, does y'all have anything else you want to add? Or Kai,
I have two little stories that I want to add to this. They've been percolating in my mind over the course of this. And it's more, we should be thinking of, especially things like public school and schooling in general, as also like times when we are socializing kids. It's when we're teaching them kind of how to interact with other human beings, how to interact with adults, how to interact with kids who are your peers, sometimes how to interact with kids who are younger than you or older than you. And you're learning about the different people in your community because you're with kids who are part of these different sections of your communities. And I remember when a bunch of my friends were being taken out of public school where I went and being put into private school, the thing that upset me the most at the time was that they were intentionally being taken away from learning about the people in their community, the people who are around them, the people that they are going to grow up and be peers of, and instead they're being cloistered away in institutions that were overwhelmingly white, when Orlando is a hugely mixed city, with people who were at higher income brackets, people who were all of the same religion. And I always saw that as a breeding ground of basically ingraining these prejudices within them, when they might not have, they had a chance to be saved from that by being in situations where they had to know other people and they had to be in close contact with them. And like, I know for a fact that these friends of mine probably would not have met another Indigenous person. My best friend when I was really little was Vietnamese, and her family fled kind of the last flames of the war in Vietnam. They would not have met her. They would not have met the Cambodian refugee that came to my school. They would not have met the Black kids that are in their community already. Their families have been in Orlando for hundreds of years, maybe. They would not have met these people. But there's also the part of it where you are having kind of emotional and mental growth just by being around adults who ostensibly should care about you as a kid in their care, even when you're in the older grades. And while we were talking about this, especially for CRT, I'll start with the fact that my mom is the Indigenous side of my family. And when I was in the first grade, I'm pretty sure this happened when I was in kindergarten as well, but I can't remember. But in the first grade, my mom, she was not asked, she offered to come into the school and do talks with the kids who were in first grade at the time that I was in first grade. And at that point, you're the history that was taught to you of Indigenous people, of Native Americans, was very, very light. It would have been, paper bag, finger painted vests, and doing like the Thanksgiving story, basically. And my mom offered to come into the school and tell stories and do accessible crafts with kids who are my own age at that point. And I, to this day, there are kids that I went to school with who remember that, who remember my mom and remember me, because it was a moment of having engagement with an adult who is telling you, like, she wasn't talking about westward expansion and massacres and things like that. That could have been brought up at some point or in older ages or whatever. That's something that I've done as an adult. I've gone into schools and done presentations about these things. But at that point, it was, those kids were the ones who were more likely to treat me like a person than people who were not later on down the line. And the school district that I was in, it was very like insular, kind of like, if you went to this elementary school, you were staying at that elementary school the entire way. And if you went to that one, then you knew which middle school you were going to. And if you went to that middle school, you knew which high school you were going into. So you knew these kids for possibly 12 or 13 years. And those kids knew me and knew how to treat me better than kids who ended up mixing into that system later on, who never met my mom, who never saw the presentations that I did with her. And we did them further than the first grade. I remember we did them at least in the third grade, definitely in the fourth grade, and again in fifth grade. And so these kids knew me. They had a better understanding of who I was as a Native American in their school. They knew my family because my family came in and did shows like this. And they'll still talk about, like, I had somebody who is now like the same age as me. He's 33, and he reminded me of a presentation that we did in school this year. So like at that moment that you're being taught at least a little tiny different bit of this history, a little bit about the people around you. At the same time that my mom started doing this, we had some of the Pacific Islander families come in, and they would do presentations and dances and stories and accessible crafts with the kids. And these are things that stick with you for quite a long time. You're learning about the community around you. You're learning that these adults, these people are part of your community. And to kind of springboard off of that, when it comes to Don't Say Gay, I remember, I'm gonna have a hard time not crying about this because it impacted me so heavily. But in the 7th grade, I had a language arts teacher who was one of my favorite teachers. And he was out and gay. And I don't know if he ever like said so like with specific words in class, but everybody knew at that point. And I remember one day walking into class and the lights being low, and he had been out for a couple days, and he sat down with us and had a heart-to-heart where he talked about being hate crimed in the parking lot of a McDonald's. Excuse me for a moment. And that moment of knowing somebody in your community, somebody who's close to you, who was being treated differently for his sexuality to begin with, and then the crime that was committed against him because of that, in a place that we all knew is a local McDonald's not far away from where I grew up. Having those moments with adults in your life as a kid or a teenager, an adolescent of any age, you're learning more about the experiences of people around you that you might not yourself already know. And when you cut off that ability of somebody just being able to talk about their lived experience with kids in an accessible way to them, you're taking so much from the adult in that situation, but you're also taking away from the kids in that situation, because these are experiences that some of those kids might go on to experience. Or just knowing that you have a gay teacher and that he's okay and you can still have fun with him. Knowing a gay adult as a queer teenager, a queer adolescent, or somebody who's not sure yet, or even the straight kids in that situation, having access to those adults who care about you, who are in your community, and who are telling you about their experiences is so powerful. And things like this take away from it so much that you are not doing your kids any service by making them believe that they live in a community that has no gay people, that has no history for the non-white people in that community, who has no connection to the atrocities of the past that have a direct bearing on what's happening now. You are setting them up for failure when you do this. You're taking so much away from these kids. And I'm sure you can hear it in my voice that I'm so fucking upset about this. That if I was these kids now, I wouldn't hear these stories. I didn't even cry this much when we did the residential schools episode.
That actually,
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Lexie, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I've cried a lot about it already. I've kind of cried out about it, but that's just like a testament to the importance of diversity and the importance of education and the importance of community. And I do fear that this is going to take away, but I am also hopeful that there will be enough people who are willing to stand up against it and say, I'm not doing this. You know, I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to be myself. I'm going to love kids. I'm going to be there for them no matter what. So I do think it's going to have a lot of negative effects, but I also believe that educators are there for a reason. We love kids. We're compassionate about, you know, we believe in what we believe. And I really hope that enough of us will not stand for this.
That actually I don't know if I've told this story on the podcast, but I think a lot of these, the reason I'll tell is because I think a lot of these politicians, a lot of these teachers think that like kids like believe their bullshit, and they don't. And the story for me is our senior year of high school. So obviously I went to Catholic school, so that's a whole different set of bullshit. But we got to elect like class president and stuff like that. But we also got to elect our chaplain. And obviously going to Catholic school, we had to have mass every Friday. I think when they built the new cafeteria, it was mass every Friday in the big auditorium cafeteria. And then I think it used to be optional on Wednesdays, but then I think it was mandatory too on Wednesdays. So it sucked. We had a whole different uniform for that. But we elected a kid to be from our class. This was senior year, we're all 17, 18 years old. Philip to be our chaplain, and lifelong Catholic school kid. And we had our senior retreat, and they had a senior retreat at one of the YMCA camps. And it was, I think it was like an overnight thing. And so we had like a thing there for seniors or whatnot. And there's a big campfire thing we had, and we were going to tell like in front of everyone, there's 91 of us graduating class, and our teachers and some administrators were there, and it was all like telling stories about like our time in high school. And everybody knew Philip was gay. All the kids, my entire class knew. But he came out at the campfire, and we were all like, you know, he was very emotional, and like he cried, and he was like really like, you know, y'all have been so nice to me, etc. And when I tell you that like the most bumble fucking lifted truck rednecks, like I'm talking like shotgun racks, like 90s model Chevy lifted pickup truck, dipping fucking tobacco in class, spitting into the Gatorade bottle, like diehard rednecks, went up to him afterwards and gave him a hug and said, you know, Philip, it's cool, man. We love you no matter what. And like this show of just like love and solidarity for him. And it was beautiful. And on the other hand, the staff and the administrators and the teachers are like, oh, it's whatever, but it's just a phase, etc. The same bullshit they say. But all the kids, all of us were like, yeah, Philip, either we knew, you told us, or we had a feeling, or like, we don't care. We still love you regardless. But the really shitty thing that the administration did is that we noticed that like, when I mentioned the mass thing, that the chaplain's supposed to give there's readings to people who are not Catholic before the priest gives the homily. There's readings from the book of whatever, etc., letters from Paul, etc., whatnot. And the chaplain usually gives one of them. He was never asked by administration to do that ever again. And we all caught on to it, and we all knew it was bullshit. But like we made sure that like in that moment at the campfire when he was the most vulnerable, when he told us about that we all 91 of us, like 90 of us, because there's one of him, all 90 of us were like, Philip, man, it's cool. We still love you. And this is at Catholic school. And I'm talking about like, this was 2008. And I'm one of like a handful of kids that voted for Obama. Everyone else is like diehard Bush and like McCain supporters. But when I tell you that like all of us 17, 18 years old told Philip that we loved him and it was cool that he was gay, we don't mind, he's still one of us, that it really goes to show you that like the kids do not give a fuck of what the administration and the teachers have to say. And we know that they're full of shit and that we're better than them. So it really goes to show you that these like administrators and teachers, like not teachers, but like, well, Catholic school teachers probably.
A lot of them, unfortunately.
A lot of them, unfortunately. Conservative, let's just say conservative teachers and conservative lawmakers, conservative administrators think that the youth is on their side when they're absolutely not. It's total. You're not stopping the tide of progress and change. You're never going to do that. No force in human history has been able to do that. So they're going to lose. So that is a good thing. I think that that's kind of the silver lining, is that they can't warp people's minds the way that they want to warp them. That to the point where when I tell you like rebel flag pickup truck rednecks, like when you picture like those people coming up to Philip afterwards and being like, "Hey man, we love you." Like if they're in cool with Philip, like you're not gonna have your army of fucking idiots fucking going along with you. So I thought that was probably one of the best moments in high school, was that. So that was something that a positive thing that the kids are all right. They're going to be okay.
Absolutely.
More recently, since I graduated in 2016, like you said, even the people that you think would be the most violent towards me, like the captain of the football team was in a class that I wasn't out in because I rationalized that I could almost like microdose being accepted. And I would only tell the teachers that I didn't have before on my senior year, be like, yes, call me Mark, and then call like whatever. The kids that my peers, my classmates, respected me enough to talk to each other about me positively when I wasn't in the room, because sorry, like I've heard him say homophobic slurs before and say things that like really made me feel awful. But he was put into a group with me in like a history class, and without even asking me, wrote down my name as Mark. Didn't make a big deal out of it, just wrote it down, and nobody, like everyone looked at it, no one said a word. All of these people who have Confederate stickers on their trucks, whose mommy and daddies are diehard Trump supporters, like even before he was in power, just already getting it like riled up, never called me a single name. Always made sure that if they said something wrong, I didn't even have to correct them. They would correct themselves. And in this school, in this district where people were told that the stereotype for the county schools were that they were so backwards, so stupid, that like this school nobody knew how to read, this school no one knew how to like do math, like the little like city schools teasing like the poor kids. I've never had people respect me and care for my emotional well-being more than any of these kids and these people that I grew up with. Not even because they liked me, not even because they thought that there was going to have any kind of kickback on them, but because they wanted to, because they felt like I was also a part of them. And I honestly haven't felt that really from anywhere else. Like, I don't know how, especially seeing the way that younger Gen Z kids are, even though they're still bullies, whatever, they're so much stronger than what I even anticipated these kids being capable of, where they're going to be okay. But I'm just, it's so strange how kids can be so sorry, I'm trying to keep my keep everything under wraps. How just the authority of these teachers over these kids is going to harm them, because the only harm that I ever had done to me because of my identity in school is because of the administrators and the teachers. Like, I have never, I don't know, there's something about being a part of such a small community of people that they're not going to be able to change it. And that's the only thing that's keeping me hopeful for these kids, is that it's the history of everything else holding these communities together, whether or not these people try their damnedest to tear it apart, is going to be the only thing that's going to keep some of these kids alive.
Yeah. And I hope like people listening understand that, like, I don't know, I guess I'll go ahead and this is another time than ever. People like do message us and they're like, I didn't know that there were people like me out there, like they can, especially rural southern places, will message podcast, social media, and unfortunately they talk to me. So I'm sorry. If you thought you were talking to Kai or Mark, you're talking to me. But and they'll say, like, I had no idea there are folks like that believe in the same things that I do, talking as them out there, and they're like, I'm so happy, etc. Like, I'm so glad there's other Southern leftists, etc., especially in the Deep South. So yeah, if you're listening to this, just know that I can guarantee you that there are thousands of other people like you, just on the data that I get from people who listen. There are thousands. So don't be afraid to be you, because there's thousands of other people out there like you.
And if you do get in touch with us and you get Nelson and you expected to talk to me, Kai, the one who's just coming on here, you can always like ask him to pass through to me, because I don't have public facing accounts, but like, if you want to talk to me, you can just ask him. I will talk to you, please.
Yeah, if there's like 1.5 people that want to talk to me, the same thing,
I'm sure they like y'all two more than they like me, so
okay.
Jeez. But now, I did say before we started recording, I said that when Nelson was introducing who this guest was going to be, and what the topic of the episode was going to be, he just kind of word spilled on me about like what was going to happen. So it was going to be don't say gay, teaching in Florida, and CRT. And I wrote it down on our schedule, and CRT autocorrected to cry. So now we can definitely title the episode that it's Teaching in Florida, Don't Say Gay and Cry. That's the episode tonight.
Yay. We joke that like the podcast is group therapy, and it's like literally it really is group therapy because we can't afford it. Oh man. Lexie, you still there? Did we scare you off?
I'm here.
Okay, cool. Yay. Do you have anything final thoughts, Lexie, that you want to say that people should know about the hellscape that is Florida?
I mean, we know what we can accomplish through school, instead of using it in a way to socialize students into American mythology and teaching them whitewashed false accounts of history or using it to commit cultural genocide. We can teach kids how to be compassionate. We can teach kids how to be critical thinkers, to understand what equity is and how to achieve it. I really believe that we can do that. That is what gives me hope. Kids like we're all talking about, kids are open-minded, they're caring. And honestly, like I said, when it comes to a lot of complex topics, oftentimes young kids surprise you. They are able to understand and accept people. They're usually better learners and listeners than adults. And so I do have hope. I believe in the power of education. I think it can change the world. I think people are good. And I just hope that we make all the real necessary changes before it's too late.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lexie, for being this for these kids.
Yeah.
I know it's not easy, and I don't know. Yeah.
I think we're all glad that you're definitely teaching the youth, and I think we all can say that we all wish we had more teachers like you instead of the random baseball coach that taught us civics.
I only had football coaches, man.
Oh God. Lexie, is there anything you want to plug, whether it be organizations or social media or anything that you want to plug?
Yeah, there's like a lot of free documentaries out there about education, educational policy, all of that. They're pretty easily accessible. I suggest reading anything by Paulo Freire. And I also recently started listening to a podcast called The Little Red Schoolhouse, which seems pretty cool. So.
Hell yeah. That's awesome. I've heard them before. I definitely want to check them out because I've heard of that podcast before.
Yeah, they're really cool, and they say a lot of the same things that I often like to talk about and think about. So, well, I haven't heard that many episodes from them, but from what I've seen so far, everyone's
gonna stop listening right at this point and go listen to them and just be like, enough of this Dixie Pro stuff. Let's go to Little Red Schoolhouse. All right, y'all. So at Dixieland the Proletariat, I believe the South will rise again, and this time for the right reasons. Those being work on means of production, decolonization, self-determination for all oppressed people. Make sure to click on our link tree in the show notes to find all of our social media. We are coming to you from the birthplace of the civil rights movement, Montgomery, Alabama, as well as sweet Georgia and jolly old England. We would also like to recognize that we're recording on land that's occupied and rightfully belongs to the Muskogee and Cherokee Nation. Lexie, thank you again for coming on. We hope that Ron DeSantis loses whenever the election is. Obviously, electoralism is not necessarily going to save us, but if you're in the state of Florida, for the love of God, just vote for whoever is not Ron DeSantis, because he is a monster and is horrible and is the devil. So yeah, Mark.
I would sniffle really loud into the microphone, but I don't want to do that to people that would be like extremely turned off by that. So
how considerate.
Just imagine like sniffling, and that's the quote for today.
Oh my God. All right, y'all.